This episode is sponsored by the Body Image Upgrade, a 30-day course helping you rebuild your relationship with your body. Tools, resources, and daily exercises to upgrade your body image. Learn more at bodyimageupgrade.com and enter the code podcast for 50% off. Welcome to Breaking Body Biases, a podcast about creating health and happiness without worrying about your weight. I'm Christine D. Philippus, certified fitness professional, studio owner, and creator of FitProEd, an online education platform for group fitness instructors. Join me every week as I interview fellow fitness pros, dietitians, wellness practitioners, and a wealth of others who are sharing their journey and helping to destroy diet culture. Welcome to episode 14 of the Breaking Body Biases podcast. This is Christine here, your host, and I'm so grateful to have you tuning in today. Whether it's your very first time or you've been tuning in, we have something to celebrate today. We've hit 1,000 downloads, and I know it's in part to each and every guest who has invited people that they know to tune into the podcast, and our audience just continues to grow. If you listened for one particular guest and you keep tuning in because you want to learn more or stay involved with this community, I am just so grateful, because our ultimate goal is to amplify these voices and share more stories and experiences so we can grow our community and really dismantle all the harm that's being done in the world due to diet culture and really create, again, this community of really happy and healthy individuals. So I can't thank you enough. This week on the show, we have another amazing guest, Mia Greco. She is an anti-diet registered dietitian specializing in finding peace with food, utilizing the principles within intuitive eating. She has her own private practice, Olive Branch Nutrition, which provides medical nutrition therapy in a weight-inclusive, body-positive framework, and she primarily focuses on disordered eating, chronic dieting, eating disorder recovery, and general preventative nutrition. She, of course, is Health at Every Size aligned. In addition to her medical nutrition therapy, she also offers intuitive eating small group programming. She's based in Illinois, and she also is an adjunct professor at Harper College. So she is the one that is educating future dietitians, and I'm thrilled about that. You're going to learn a little bit more about that and the work that she's doing in our interview. She's very passionate about nutrition and wellness and healthcare to be more inclusive and encompassing space for all people. She has a family of her own, 2 small children, a husband and a dog. She loves practicing yoga and dancing, of course, reading, and just being very present in her life. Some of the topics that we're going to discuss today is how she got into the work of being a dietitian. It's kind of a common story that I've heard amongst many of the dietitians I spoke to on this show. Her eating disorders and the misconceptions around eating disorders. It's very eye-opening. And some fad diets, myths, and misconceptions around. Boy, we get into quite a few very popular, trendy diets that are out there, and she shares her expertise, if you will, around like why they're not healthy at all, and in fact, and how they could actually be doing harm, and what you could be doing instead. So let's get into this week's episode. So welcome, Mia, to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Christine. I'm very excited to talk with you as well.
So you're a registered dietitian. You're also someone that teaches future dietitians that come into this practice. So tell me how you got to be a dietitian. Is it something that you grew up and you wanted to be, or is there some things that happened in your life that made you take this career path?
Sure. So I didn't really know what a dietitian was. So I started looking up career paths, and I had always had kind of a fascination, or actually not a fascination. This is probably an unhealthy obsession with trying to lose weight. So initially, that is actually what kind of led me to dietetics, unfortunately. I had a desire to learn about nutrition so I can maintain a frame that I felt was, societally acceptable. So I guess you could say that I struggled with my body image and maybe that I felt that I was in a little bit larger body than my peers. And I got made fun of for that in elementary school, junior high, high school. Definitely a lot of small traumas that led me to really be obsessed with food and have a poor self-image. So unfortunately, my dietetics career started off not necessarily as the pursuit of a passion to help people become healthy, but almost from my own place of disordered body image and a desire to be thin. And thankfully, that has evolved very much in the past 13 years as I've grown as a person and as a dietitian. So I worked in long-term care for a lot of my career, so nothing really to do with what I'm doing now. But eventually I found intuitive eating. I actually just really discovered intuitive eating, I would say 2 years ago, and it's been around since 1995. So once I discovered intuitive eating, that's all I wanted to learn about. My focus shifted completely and I started my own private practice focusing on weight inclusive medical nutrition therapy and a health at every size aligned approach. And as I counseled folks in those areas for just general health conditions, I became more and more passionate about really working with folks with disordered eating, eating disorders, chronic dieting, and really trying to, help folks recover from all of society's ideals about what a body should look like. And that's where I'm at now. Small private practice, Olive Branch Nutrition. My tagline is finding peace with food freedom. So I really love to work with clients to restore and heal their relationships with food and their bodies so that they can live a full, nourishing life, not focused or obsessed about a number on the scale.
So we're going to get into some of the things that you just mentioned because you talked about eating disorders and having that disordered body image. But you mentioned something about intuitive eating and it made me wonder. You mentioned that you learned about intuitive eating and that wasn't in school. So I know that dietitian school, that the schooling that you go through in order to become a registered dietitian, it's quite lengthy and extensive. But is there any mention or coverage of intuitive eating in that coursework?
Unfortunately, not. There will be, though, because that's a good segue to my other career. I work as an adjunct faculty member and a clinical supervisor at Harper College, which is a junior college, a community college outside of Chicago. And we've just started our dietetic internship program. We have an inaugural class starting this fall. And I'll be privileged enough to actually teach our students about intuitive eating. Fortunately, for the new class of dietitians, there's a lot more dietitians that are focusing on intuitive eating and really focusing on a more holistic approach and kind of backing away from that intentional weight loss that riddled our field for years. And I think it's still prevalent. There's still weight loss programs and certificates in our professional organizations. So just one dietitian at a time. And I'm fortunate to have, again, the privilege to be able to teach these new dietitians about intuitive eating and being mindful about weight stigma and the social justice issues that impact the lives of those that live in larger bodies.
Yeah. And I appreciate that, just like you said, one dietitian at a time, that doing this work is difficult, like getting that shift. I see it in the fitness industry and we're taking those small steps, shifting the fitness movement, fitness education actually, to help fitness instructors not focus on weight as the goal. So it's a big shift though. You get a lot of resistance. So I'm not sure how difficult it was for you to shift that in the work that you're doing as an educator of future dietitians.
Sure. So again, I have a couple colleagues that really aren't they still haven't shifted to that mentality. They respect where I come from, but they certainly still think that there's a place for weight loss. But fortunately, we're all mature enough to kind of work together and teach our viewpoints and kind of say, hey, you need to kind of pick the path that you want to go to. I think I'm a little bit more persuasive than some of my other colleagues. So I'm hoping that my thoughts and my philosophies will be more ingrained, of course. But again, there's shades of gray, and I just want to teach them, what my personal philosophies and beliefs are. And again, like you said, it's chipping away and just kind of planting the seed for these ideas with the hopes that eventually everyone will kind of catch up to where we're at.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So let's talk a little bit about eating disorders, because I know you do work in this area. And I
Mhm.
know that, for some people, they think eating disorders is something like, extreme cases where you're anorexic or you're bulimic, but there's a difference between eating disorders and disordered eating. Can you get into that a little bit for me?
Sure. So I would say that there's a spectrum of disordered eating. Any type of restriction or structured diet plan or restricting certain food groups or obsessing about food can be considered disordered eating. I think probably almost every American woman has had some type of experience with a disordered eating. Now, whether or not that escalated to a full blown eating disorder depends on a lot of factors. There are environmental factors, there's supports, their genetic predisposition to developing an eating disorder. So some people who are more perfectionistic or have mental health, histories will be more likely to develop a full-blown eating disorder. But again, there's some misconceptions about who can have an eating disorder as well. So there's a lot of size stigma. So those that are of a normal BMI often go undiagnosed with eating disorders because people look at them and say, oh, look, you look great. You've lost some weight. And reiterate and reinforce that disordered eating. And those folks don't get the help that they need because they're in a normal body. So oftentimes we see that the perception of society is that you don't have an eating disorder unless you're like literally emaciated. We see the pictures on the TV, malnourished looking, thin white woman, thin hair, bones showing, emaciated. But in reality, eating disorders can affect people of all different shapes and sizes. And for me personally, when I was going to school to be a dietitian, I never got diagnosed with a formal eating disorder. No one even thought about me having an eating disorder. But looking back on it now and the knowledge that I have, I would say that I had orthorexia, which is not a diagnosis yet, but it should be. And this is just an obsession with clean eating and exercising. And I had restricting behavior. Like, who knows what it really was. But again, I was praised because I had always been, the only way that I maintained a normal BMI was by restricting. So the red flags weren't going off for people because they're like, oh, look at her. She's studying to be a dietitian and she's really focusing on her nutrition and her exercise. And my mental health was awful. I mean, I was in the throes of, I did Weight Watchers, and we can talk about diets. I did Weight Watchers and saved up all my points for alcohol so that I was beyond inebriated in college. And then, you're binging, you're purging. I had, excessive exercise, hours in the gym, and et cetera. And I'm a perfect example because my BMI was normal. It really didn't set off any red flags. I got praised for it. So again, I almost feel like almost every person that I talk to has some aspect of disordered eating. Again, not a clinical diagnosis, but some just because of our society. So,
And because so many people, probably some listeners, could start looking into their habits and lifestyle and what they're doing, how can it affect you in a way, obviously, that you had mentioned a few things like about your mental health, but if you're experiencing these things and you're saving up points for alcohol, like, is there something unhealthy? Because again, it was looked, a lot of these diets are looked upon as healthy, they can't do any long-term damage. They're not going to die from doing these things, but is there some health risks? Are there problems with these?
oh, certainly. So anytime you're restricting a certain food group, let's say you're eliminating carbohydrates and you're on a keto diet, et cetera, you're missing nutrients, fiber, et cetera. So those are the direct physical benefits. You're not going to feel well. You're going to be constipated. You're going to have brain fog. But if you continue to be on these weight cycling and restrictive diets, what happens is eventually your metabolism actually decreases. Your body is in a constant stress mode because it feels like it's trying to survive a famine. So you have that increase of that cortisol and that stress hormone. And we all know that probably one of the most dangerous things for our health is stress. So just the obsession of constantly having to worry about exactly what you're going to put in your mouth, planning all of your meals, shopping for all of your meals, not attending social events because you're scared that there's not going to be something for you to eat. The time, the money, everything is just a drain on your life. So those are the consequences of chronic dieting. You never, not talk about the money, the time, the shame, the guilt. I mean, and then also the physical side effects, depending on which fad diet you're on, and depleting whatever nutrients that those foods that you're restricting may provide. So there's a plethora. People think it's clean and healthy, but again, we're not looking at the big picture, including your mental health. So yes,
Yeah,
dieting is not good.
it's definitely glorified in a lot of ways. Even the orthorexia that you'd mentioned, I think in the fitness industry, it's probably thought of as you have strong willpower and you have, you know, just this superior ability to, you know, restrict, and that's a good thing. So it's like such a toxic mentality to promote. So I think that it's just so acceptable and so prevalent. And then when you're doing it, and like you had mentioned earlier, you're getting that feedback that says, oh, you look good, what are you doing? And you're doing unhealthy things. I mean, I was right there doing those things and being told, you look so great, what are you doing? And I was benefiting from weight loss, but unhealthy in so many other ways. So I'm glad to be healthier, even if it means being not in the typical or ideal body size for a
Mhm.
fitness instructor. So appreciate your input on that. So let's talk about each one of these diets, because I think
Mhm.
there's so many misconceptions, so much misinformation. And obviously, these diets are promoted in a way that they're healthy. I'm using air quotes for those listening, and you'll help debunk how they're unhealthy and what they actually, maybe their original purpose and everything. Because I know we talked before about keto diet. I know that's a
Mhm.
very popular diet now. So I want to share more about that diet for us.
Sure. So keto diet actually originated for a purpose to treat epilepsy, which is a seizure disorder in children. And they don't even know the mechanism of action of why it actually works. So a keto diet is actually a high fat diet. So like 70% of your calories coming from fat, moderate protein, and then a very low carbohydrate diet. So, as we know, or as most people know, we're demonizing the carbohydrates in this diet plan. And your brain alone needs 110 grams of glucose just to function. Okay. So, this diet is calling for less than 20 grams of carbohydrate. So, one of the initial side effects of this diet is you can't think. I don't know how people work on this diet. I don't know. So, you've got a brain fog. So that's because you're not getting enough glucose, which is the primary energy source for the brain and for your entire body. This is what the body is designed to burn, glucose as their primary source of fuel. So when you switch up that fuel to fat, you're not getting the energy you need. You're going to be sluggish. Plus, long-term consumption of saturated fats, as we know, causes cardiovascular disease. So in a lot of these low carbohydrate diets we've seen, the evidence is that there are one study that I saw is an incidence of AFib. So abnormal heart rhythms associated with these high carbohydrate or high fat diets, low carbohydrate. Another thing we have to be concerned about is kidney function also, because the metabolites of higher protein and higher fat diets can stress the kidney and can stress the liver. You can get fatty liver from these really high fat diets. So the preferred ratio of nutrients is, 50% carb, 30% fat, 20% protein. So you're skewing the entire scale on keto. And again, you don't want to go into long-term ketoacidosis. Not a good place to be. That's, typically people are hospitalized for these things and people are doing it intentionally to themselves, which just is silly. Now, will you lose weight on keto? Sure, you'll lose weight. Can you sustain it? No. Are you going to be constipated? Probably. Is your breath going to smell? Yeah. Are you not going to be able to eat birthday cake or your wedding cake or just live a normal life without obsessing about, what you're eating? No. As soon as you go off of it, what will happen? You will regain the weight, because ultimately keto is the only reason that it's working is because it's decreasing calories because you're restricting a food group. is pretty much. And there's more satiety with fat. So you feel full, so maybe you eat less. So those are the mechanisms. But again, as soon as you stop, your lab values may have improved or not, but they're all going to go back to baseline. And it's likely that you will gain more weight because you're messing with your set point every time you restrict. So that's keto.
So you did mention that there are people that lose weight on this. I mean, I see this all the time from those that have done the keto diet basically by choice, or some have been put on keto diets from doctors that are trying to have them lose weight quickly for health concerns. And they say, but it works. It works. See, I lost weight. But you're saying that it's not sustainable by any means.
No, unless you never want to eat carbohydrates again. And like, really, can you think about that? Is that really anything? And plus the health risk, we don't know what the long-term health risks are is as far as consuming that much saturated fat and not getting essential B vitamins from carbohydrates. And I know some people say, oh no, but the way I practice keto is I eat salmon and broccoli all the time. Well, that's not truly, you're healthy because you're eating salmon and broccoli, not because you're following a ketogenic diet necessarily. So adding salmon and broccoli, and how about some quinoa with your plate? So you have the energy and you have all the benefits. And also there's a study comparing keto with the Mediterranean diet. The keto diet restricted a whole group of foods. The Mediterranean diet includes all foods, and the results are better with the Mediterranean diet long-term. Again, it's about sustainability and that satisfaction of eating, which is more than just about weight loss. Health is not weight loss.
Yeah.
And doctors are another one that I work on, one doctor at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause you even mentioned earlier about the brain fog. And I remember now I have never done keto because back in the day it had a slightly different name. I did Atkins diet. So I know it's not exactly the same, but similar idea. And I wasn't able to work out during that time. I'm a fitness professional. I wasn't able to work out. I was thin, so I didn't feel like I needed to. Again, that's diet culture for you. And I felt very dumb. I really had a lot of brain fog. So that was not sustainable for, those two reasons. I enjoy doing my fitness. So other benefits for working out and moving your body beyond weight loss. So I learned that over the years. But yeah, I can't imagine the brain fog alone, how that's sustainable. Even if you are restricted and you're able to stay on that restriction train because you so fear the pounds coming back on, because fear led me through a lot of hardships where I felt like, okay, I'm going to struggle because I'm too scared to put the weight back on. But man, that brain fog is brutal.
No, yeah. You can't think. You need glucose. You need it.
So let's move on to another popular trend right now in that people are doing paleo.
Okay, so paleo, it eliminates carbohydrates and legumes. It calls that you eat primarily wild caught and grass-fed meats. I think it eliminates dairy also. So the only good thing about this diet, again, is it focuses on fresh veggies and, lean meats and things like that. But it's not accessible for most because who has access to grass-fed everything, grass-fed meats and only organic, no GMO, vegetables, which we could go into a whole nother topic about how I feel about that. But again, it's eliminating your fiber containing whole grains and legumes. Those, you need variety in your diet. And again, so this is not sustainable and you're not getting the adequate glucose that you need for your brain to function properly. So again, paleo is very common, I think, in like the CrossFit gyms and things like that. So again, more benefits in the fact that you're adding, the benefits from this diet alone come from the fact that you're adding more fruits and vegetables. But again, this is not a sustainable diet. Any diet that eliminates any food group is not something that is recommended at all. So this is a no also. This is just another diet dressed up.
Yeah, not very accessible either. I mean, talk about expensive.
Yes.
That sounds like something that might be promoted on Goop, but we'll get to Goop's
Yes.
their new diet in a minute. But it made me think of how the trend now is to make it more lifestyle, that if I, eat healthy, And I think that the Whole30 is one of those things, or there might be other diets out there with different names that are just kind of promoting eat healthy. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts on that? Because I would assume that a dietitian would say, yeah, it's good to eat healthy.
Sure. So a lot of those diets, though, are branding themselves as wellness or eating healthy, but then you see the diet culture sneakily hidden in there. Anything that's telling you to count or track or rely on external factors of what you're consuming and not listening to your body and becoming attuned with your body, it's just another money making scheme. Weight Watchers comes to mind now, rebranded as WW because they're all about the wellness. We're going to teach you the right way to eat, but you only get this many points. Again, if you use those points and you're hungry, it's telling you to ignore your hunger cues or dip into your flex points or your exercise points, but it's telling you that you have to count, and it's telling you how many points and whether or not you're hungry or not. And again, people do a lot of things where with Weight Watchers that they'll save up all their points for a party. So they'll be starving themselves all day and then utilize their points for foods like alcohol. And again, alcohol is personally for me the only food that I believe should be restricted in the diet, but people will consume alcohol and not sugar, which makes no sense. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's another topic. But yeah, so Weight Watchers is definitely one of those ones that's wellness or lifestyle hidden, in diet culture. Same with Noom. Noom is a new one that people are really getting into because they're like, oh, it's education. It's like I have this, somebody to tell me exactly what to do. Great, that's fine. But then they also tell you how many calories you eat and you're tracking. As soon as you start tracking, and again, like I said, figuring out your hunger and fullness cues from an external place and not really listening to your cues, it's going to be a restrictive diet. Because again, Noom is telling you once you've had your calories for whatever, that's it. You're not allowed to eat anymore. And God forbid you're hungry. Like, so you're again ignoring those body signals. You wouldn't ignore your bladder if you had to use the restroom. Why do you ignore your stomach when it's asking for food? So
Yeah,
those,
that seems very logical, but people are listening to the rules. In fact, that just sparked my thoughts about intermittent fasting. Because when I
yes.
tried that, I would get headaches and I would feel, obviously very hungry. But I wouldn't thinking about when I had to go to the bathroom, I would just go to the bathroom when I have to go to the bathroom. I don't know why we don't think that way. That's a great analogy. So what are your thoughts on
Because
intermittent fasting?
well, again, you're not listening to your body cues. And intermittent fasting, speaking of disordered eating, is one of the diets that really anybody who has any history of disordered eating should not try to do intermittent fasting, even I would say as far as for religious and cultural reasons, because if you have a history of disordered eating, any type of fasting it may trigger some restriction behaviors or binging, purging, etc. So intermittent fasting, again, it's not listening to your body's cues. It's not allowing yourself upon waking up, you have your coffee to put cream in your coffee. It's telling you you can't have cream in your coffee because it's not in your eating window. It's telling you you can't go out to ice cream after dinner with your kids because it's not in your eating window. It's saying that you can't go to breakfast with your family because your eating window doesn't start until 10. Like, why would you allow a set of rules to dictate your life and be so obsessed about something? For what purpose? That's not health. That's not health. That's a goal of losing weight based on restrictive, starving. Again, that's a calorie restriction because you're not listening to your body's cues. You're denying yourself food when you're actually feeling hungry. So again, intermittent fasting, unless it's for a religious or cultural or medical procedure, if you need to fast for a medical procedure, of course you have to do that. But outside of those, again, not healthy.
I remember when I had to fast for a surgery a few years back, and it was torture because I think for me, especially coming from a disordered past, it's all I could think about during that window of time. And lucky for me, it was a short amount of time that I had to, and I slept through most of it. But it was even hard to fall asleep because knowing that I wasn't allowed to eat. And of course, this was not for, diet culture purposes or weight loss. This was for to be under anesthesia. So it does make sense. But I couldn't imagine that being my daily life, that every night when I went to bed, I wouldn't be able to get through it. It just wouldn't be healthy at all and on so many levels.
And that's exactly what happens with all of these restrictive diets. As soon as you start restricting, a certain food group, that's all you're going to think about. And that's when you get these cheat days and you get these binge days, and then you get the cycle of shame again. So you've restricted, and then all of a sudden you can't, all you're thinking about keto, all you're thinking about is carbs. You just want a piece of bread, and you obsess about it until you literally eat like 5 loaves of bread or whatever that you've been, restricting. And then you're like, okay, gotta get back on the wagon, and your shame, guilt, disgust with yourself, which are all really crappy emotions to have. And then you do it again. You restrict, you binge, you weight cycle, and it's just a never ending cycle.
Yeah. And I feel like people now are inventing new ways to say the same thing, like you said, restriction, because what came to my mind now is that, Weight Watchers had to say, okay, we're going to have points. So that way you're distracted from calories. We're going to call them points. Now, I feel like now we're not even using calories. People are counting macros, and that's healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So can you get into what macros are? Because I've had people ask, okay, well, but I'm not counting calories. It's not restrictive. I'm counting my macros. So what's the difference there, or is there not a difference?
Sure. Well, macros are assigned to calories. So ultimately, you're still counting calories. So a macro is just short for macronutrient. So it's based on the percentage, let's say 50% of your diet should be carbohydrates. So what I would calculate is what 50% calories would be coming from carbohydrate. I would divide that by 4 because there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. And then that would tell me how many grams of carbohydrate I could get through the day. So like one macro would be like 12 grams or an exchange of carbohydrate. So at one meal, I'm allowed 3 exchanges of, or 3 macro counts, carbohydrate, 1 fat, 2 protein, whatever, based on whoever made up your macro plan. So it's still doing the same exact thing. It's just a more complicated way. And you're not necessarily, actually, it's probably an easier way because you're just counting, like once you know what a macro carb is, like you can spot that and visualize that. But again, ultimately it's counting calories because it's based on your calorie needs. So it's just a fancy box for calorie counting. Macronutrient meal plans can be helpful for some disease states to monitor and help with like diabetes and things like that, under the guidance of a dietitian and medical doctor. But again, you're basing external factors. You're looking at a meal plan made by somebody else for you to tell you what to eat, based on your calorie needs.
I see this happen so much in the fitness world that trainers are giving meal plans or telling people how many macros they should be counting for themselves. And at least I feel like you had mentioned some situations where a meal plan will be necessary because of, different health conditions or whatever, but you have the schooling and the education to personalize something. So do you do that kind of work where you set meal plans for people? Because you have, again, the background and the education to back that up.
Sure. So actually in eating disorder recovery, we do utilize meal plans just to make sure that they're eating an adequate amount of food. And often our goal is weight restoration, making sure that they're gaining weight depending on where they're at. So in that context, we'll definitely use meal plans just to have more structure as they're healing, with the ultimate goal of intuitive eating at the end. So we use, a meal plan kind of as like a stepping stool for them to really figure out what their hunger and fullness cues are. Or again, a little bit of structure for diabetics, especially if they're on insulin, they need to dose their insulin and things like that. But your normal typical person who's just coming in for general nutrition, I will not make them a meal plan. I'll talk about meal ideas. We'll talk about what they can add to their diet, and I'll assess their needs for my personal, but I will not tell them how many calories they should be consuming. Again, my whole goal is to get them to really listen to their bodies and not those external factors. So
and that can be really challenging if they've spent a lifetime going external. So are there some things that help guide people to look more inward and to eat more intuitively rather than those external factors? What guidance can you give? I know you can't give a whole lot right now.
Yes.
That's what working with you you can benefit from that, but just maybe a few strategies.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's hard to get back in tune with your hunger, especially if you have been a chronic dieter. Really just getting in tune and realizing that you don't need those external factors. So the first thing is kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and getting rid of the Calorie King app, the MyFitnessPal. I even suggest for people not even to wear fitness tracking watches. I ditched mine about a year ago and it's so liberating. Not going on the scale. So those are just some small things to kind of start and gradually get away from that. Cleaning up your social media feed is something you can do to have more body positive, intuitive eating. Get rid of the keto diet bloggers, influencers, whoever that you follow that makes you feel like crap about your body. But it is a process. And when you really decide that you want to ditch that meal plan and that structure, you have to be emotionally ready for that. You have to figure out some, coping skills and strategies for emotional eating, the shame and the guilt. You kind of have to address those issues before you really can become an intuitive eater. But once you get there, it's, like I said, it completely liberating.
Yeah, for sure. I know for a fact, because that chronic dieting, the let's say yo-yo dieting, what's the word I'm looking for? Like just weight cycling too, that
Yes.
it's just not a good place to be in. So I appreciate you spending the time and today and kind of dispelling some misinformation that is definitely out there, that people need to know the truth behind these, fad diets, and understand that there's just a better way. So let me ask you a few questions, and I'm going to put your information in the show notes. And we have a new feature on our podcast too, where on our website, you can leave a message. So if you have a question for Mia or any of our other guests, you can go to the website, ask your question. Do you have a question about a fad diet that we didn't discuss today? You can just go to breakingbodybiases.com and leave your question, and we'll answer it in a future episode. But I'd like to get to know Mia's kind of favorites as we close out this week's episode. So let us know what your favorite way to move your body is.
I love yoga. So I do a lot of yoga, every single type: Bikram yoga, vinyasa, hatha, kundalini, any yoga, anywhere, paddleboard yoga. That's really fun. So that's definitely my jam, yoga.
Fun. I like the variety too. I have not tried paddleboard yoga. I'm always afraid that I'm going to fall in the water.
I did the first time I went, but so there is a chance of that. And I was terrified, but it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And then once you get out there and you're in nature, and at the end, and you're doing savasana with your fingers like in the water, it's
Oh,
like the most relaxing experience ever. So I highly recommend paddleboard yoga.
yeah, just don't get too relaxed and fall asleep and roll
All
over.
over.
That
Yeah.
would be not good. So, your favorite way to practice self-care?
Again, I could say yoga again, but reading. I'm an avid reader. I love to take that time and kind of disappear. Reading, journaling, doing creative pursuits like that are really what I do to take care of myself.
And then this year, more than ever, we've probably spent more time binging things. Could be books, podcasts, television shows, movies. Is there anything that you found binge worthy this year you'd like to share?
Well, books for sure. So, of course, I've been doing a lot of webinars on eating disorder training. Trauma informed care has been really cool. I've been learning about that, polyvagal theory. So, I've been nerding it out, kind of just all these webinars on neuroscience and trainings. So, that's definitely what I've been binging on this year.
Nice. And then for music, we use a lot of music in the studio here, and sometimes it's for dancing and finding joy. Maybe you want have a nice playlist for yoga. Maybe you like to box and have something aggressive to listen to. But do you have anything that you're listening to right now? It could be a song, an artist, a style of music that you're really enjoying.
Sure. Actually, my 5-year-old has been really into the song Dance Monkey. So we've
Yes,
been listening. Do you know that song?
I do know
Dance,
that song.
dance for
Yes.
me, dance for me, dance for me. And she's 5. And that's been fun. When I'm by myself and the kids aren't around, again, I revert back to my high school music. So I graduated in 2000. So all that kind of 90s stuff is fun for me to listen to and get nostalgic to.
Yeah, 90s was a good era for music. Had a lot
Sure
of
was.
variety, and I definitely like to put on some 90s hip hop from time to
Yep.
time.
Yes.
Make me feel like I'm salt and pepper.
Yes,
dancing.
totally self-better.
Well, it was so great having you here today. And like I said, we will put your information in the show notes. So if you'd like to connect with Mia, please go to our website and check her information out and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much, Mia, for being here today.
My absolute pleasure, Christine. Thank you.
So that was my interview with Mia. I hope you enjoyed it and you connected with Mia. I'm going to put her information in the show notes so you can easily connect with her, follow her on social media. And if you have a question for Mia or for a previous guest or myself, we have a brand new feature on our website. You can just click on the Leave a Message tab, either at the bottom or the side of the website, and you can just leave us a voicemail. You can ask us a question that you'd like to be featured on a future episode, or if you have a comment about the show, you can do that right on the website. You can also rate and review the show anywhere that you listen to your podcast, and that really helps new people find our little show and grow our audience. Our mission is to really amplify the voices of Mia and other guests that we've had on the show and destroy diet culture, help people live happier, healthier lives. Do you have a suggestion for someone that would make a great guest? We do have a place on our website that you can apply yourself or share that with someone that you know. We can't wait to continue to deliver new episodes to you each and every week, inspire you, motivate you, make you feel happy and healthy. Have a great week.